Welcome and thank you for joining us. Welcome to Trend Networks Academy. This is intended to be informative sessions to help you with the industry, knowledge and information about infrastructure testing and maintenance. Today's subject is on security IP infrastructure. Once again, welcome to the Academy and thank you for joining us today. My name's Gordon White. I'm the product guide for today's knowledge journey, and we look forward to doing a few more of these presentations in time to come. Today's session is about proof of performance and how we can remove your guesswork when installing and maintaining commercial network systems. The scope of today's discussion is quite common as we expand in security networks. It would make sense that the correct installation and maintenance of Ethernet cables in the buildings around us is a critical part of when we deploy and maintain these IP systems. And you can imagine, as we add more functions to cameras and more cameras, we need to do more. So the theme of today's discussion is around about what to do, where to test, and how much more we need to test. So I really hope you enjoy this. There's a lot to digest today. Let's get started. Okay, so in this webinar, we're going to address the increasing challenges that security integrators are faced with. We introduce 4 of the must-do areas, must-do steps when installing and operating for operational maintenance. Overall, our objective is to help you improve reliability and customer satisfaction. As modern IP systems evolve, and I'd like to use the term modern IP systems because we'd like to consider that about them being a combination of power and data. So that's PoE, modern IP systems evolve, infrastructure connection quality, the device power feed becomes increasingly critical. We now have the advent of AI bringing greater interest because you can do more with it. There's more efficiencies that AI would bring to the back end and functionality in cameras. So we will likely see more cameras deployed. Okay. Again, welcome to Trend Networks and welcome to our learning journey. Okay, the topics, just a quick overview of the topics we'll cover. So we're going to break it down as a part of this 4-part structure that we'll talk about today is the cabling side. So cabling connectors part, we'll be looking at the importance of how to best test cables, and then the power definitions there. And then of course, when you're adding a device, best practices there, and the suggestion on networks. Okay, so let's get some answers for you today. So a bit about the particular products we're talking about today is an IP security system. And this system has a combination of power and data operating off the same Ethernet cable. It's a fantastic solution. It's been widely adopted around the world. And you can imagine, so the combination of power and data on an IP security system, which gives it a scalable advantage because you can add more devices quickly, you can access them remotely, you can also start building in some enhanced features. We'll see that like the concepts of AI. Okay, good news, if you're in this sector, more cameras. Cameras are growing, sales of cameras are growing. And this is where, with Trend Networks Academy, we see the need to help you, assist you with best practices for testing. So the slide I've just got up here now is taken from one of the usual information groups where you can get your data from. But the key is there is growth there, and that means business opportunities for technicians out there wanting to know how to the best practice for installation and maintenance. Okay, IP PoE, as you know it, if you look at a building or anywhere around you, believe it or not, in commercial networks, is everywhere. We've seen this being deployed successfully. Okay, with that success, we kind of add more product. We add more products onto these networks. So challenges can be power budgets can be exceeded. And now with things like AI, which bringing fantastic efficiencies, there's even more interest to add more cameras. So you get the theme here. When we do more, we've got to test in more detail. So a summary of our challenges today, and of course, thank you for joining us. Let's go through some of these, is that as we add more products to an infrastructure network, a shared network, sadly, most of these brands are not interoperable. So we need some kind of proof of performance, proof of connection at the point of connection, okay? The power needs to be there as well to power that device. Again, it's critical to have enough power, and those budgets can be exceeded. There has been an advent or a development of 4-pair PoE and a new industry movement to the mandatory testing of 4-pair PoE has been introduced with that. So we'll cover the topic a little further down. And I mentioned AI with its fantastic efficiencies will bring even more interest to add more cameras. So these are some of the challenges that we need to do. And in many cases, technicians, well done out there to all your skilled technicians, you need to learn more. There's more multi-skills to learn from security, data, the power side of things to access control. So wow, there is a lot to learn and we're here to help you with that. Okay, in this case, today's session, there is a variety of test tools that are required to effectively manage these sites and efficiency in both the infrastructure meaning the cable and connectors, and of course then the application is on the network when it's connected on the network. So those two approaches are critical. So let's look at some of these examples. Let's look at what exactly it is that we're dealing with. And I hope you like this is the average shopping center, a good example of just how busy things are and where this smart building, this IoT is progressing. And it's really fantastic and a very exciting way to look at the modern world. And you wouldn't believe it, but in a shopping center, we've got quite an advanced network with sensors and pieces all around it. But it's time critical because we all want to shop, buy things quickly and move on quickly. So it could be representative of a type of infrastructure where you need to keep adding lots to it and growing as well as respond to it quickly. So let's have a look at the types of things we would need to do in a network like this. Well, firstly, at the top of the ceiling, we have cameras coming down from the roof. And note that those cameras are not easily accessible. So to bring something in there to access those cameras, you need a ladder. Of course, you can't do that whilst people are around. So you've got to do either in time or out of time. We have to select. So access to those cameras are difficult. So the most important thing is reliability. We need a very good cable and a very good connector to that system at first point. So a certifier would be used to terminate and test that cable going to that first connection. The second part we would use a device to at least prove the camera is in place properly, such as an application tester. Security test would do that, just to make sure that camera is functioning before we move that ladder away and try and connect it to the MVR. Okay. And lastly, at the bottom here, we've got MPTLs connections. So once these multiple devices are on the network, they would be on different networks. They wouldn't be on the same shared network. They might be VLAN'd out. It's another way of connecting those to the network. So they're segregated. So we'd need a device to see those various items on the network. So as you can see here, it's a suite of products subject to what you're doing within that site. Okay, so let's take a step moving ahead. Now, the interesting thing with the advent of AI, there will be more functions within that retail sector or any sector. You could add ways of programming the camera to only detect certain things for a bit greater efficiencies. But the point is there's a lot more efficiencies to come out of AI. If we look at the busy area of a supermarket, we could do the opposite. If we look at that with Axis cameras, Axis have brought here's some information from Axis about AI at the edge. So what this concept is saying, okay, if a product is at the end device, we are looking at doing more of the processing in the camera itself. So that seems to be a theme coming out from some of the camera developers to say, first we need a really good connection. I mentioned the retail store, so that you've got a very heightened connection to the camera so that you can get all this AI extra processing going on, or potentially there may be cameras which will do the processing at the point inside where the camera is. There are two techniques, but let's look at where those techniques could take place. So again, with the idea of the access camera, that could be maybe a car park. And as you can imagine, maybe not as busy or maybe as busy as a shopping center, subject to its application. But my point here is Both aspects require critical, reliable connections. Both must be tested for application assurance. And we would like to show you the best practices today. So in this case, this is a quick demo or just a quick conceptual idea that this camera would be doing its processing within the camera here for AI, and it can read just the car number plate. That's all it's interested in at this stage, okay? But imagine if you want to leave the car park or even get into the car park, you must have a reliable connection. Now let's look further into reliability. So what would reliability mean? What are these solutions to some of these challenges and knowledge that you'd need to know in this industry? So firstly, I would always recommend any kind of deployment of an IP security system is to add time-stamped proof of installation across everything. So today's webinar is also really sharing information from the field. What have we done when we've talked with customers and helped customers? Partnered with customers to solve some of their problems. And this is how we've done it. So the idea is to make sure whenever you test or install something to have a timestamp proof of installation. We'll see it in a moment. Power budget, in that case, we need to make sure products are load tested. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. Technicians, training. It's so important that these very skilled individuals, you have a lot on your shoulders. Well done. Very proud of you in the industry. In fact, there's a lot to learn, that you do need to have vendor training, plus, in our case, tester training as well. There's so much to learn because you're doing so many multiple skills out there. And lastly, please do consider a consultation. This is what today's session's about, just to make you aware that there's all these other areas. Please review your current tools, seek a consultation on the area of which you're addressing in your businesses, or what's critical to your clients, to your customers, and seek the best testing solution. And we're here to help you with that. Okay, so there's a range of testers. Tester choice is imperative. Efficiency in both infrastructure and network application is critical. Okay, so firstly, we have certification testers. They focus on components, cable, and now the PoE reliability. We're going to address that in a moment. And power verification, camera installation, and IP. Let's get started. So when I talked about proof of performance, all the products that we show today have a report. It is critical you choose a product which has reporting on it, right down to that camera application tester. So if you're choosing an application tester to install a camera, make sure you get the best report you can possible. It will help, okay? So always get the best report possible, okay? So step one, part one, is making sure, so it's infrastructure assurance, making sure the component and cables are tested properly. And now we must add PoE balance. So be aware of that. If anyone joins my webinars, this theme will come up. This is imperative. For 2025, we'll be talking a lot about this. So what is this? So cable certification. We need a certifier to do this test across the cable. So there is standards, international standards, and the TIA, the US TIA standard, has now made it mandatory that you must test for PoE. So it's a resistance test across those pairs, across all 4 pairs of that cable. You must do that, okay? And that's exactly in line with what we were thinking for as you deploy more security cameras into buildings, you're able to run them off PoE, okay? Whereas ISO would recommend that you do a test, you must test, but also do a budget calculation. And we'll see a little bit later why that budget calculation is important. It considers temperature. That's a little hitch that's so important for all of us, okay? So what is this resistance unbalance? Just on that topic. So resistance unbalance is really looking at the cable design. So not all cables are made the same. Each pair, in some cables, well, pretty much majority of cables, each pair is twisted at a different rate by design. Typically blue the most because it sits in the center of the plug. So blue's twisted the most, orange a little less, green a little less, and then brown the least. If you have that if you can imagine that blue being twisted the most, With it, as we start looking at roughly about 30 meters, it's really noticeable that there's a lot more blue pair or actual physical material in the blue pair compared to the brown. So once again, that's blue being twisted the most, and the rest of the remainder right down to the brown being tested the least. Okay, so if you have a lot more material in the blue pair, you potentially have more resistance, more characteristic impedance in that piece of material compared to the rest. And this therefore can create your resistance unbalance. So poor terminations, excessive cable length, and types of cables could also add to that. And let's learn a little bit more about that. So where could the poor termination be? Well, one particular aspect of deploying Wi-Fi and security products is it's very popular to put a crimp on RJ45. So crimp on RJ45 is very, very popular. This is a fantastic way and very neat way of doing it. However, I must inform you that plug that goes onto the end of that cable is terrible. And it's just a piece of plastic. There's not that much in it. So it's actually quite hard to get that piece of material really, really right. Okay. So because of that, I'd always recommend investing in a high quality product wherever you can to mitigate against corrosion and challenges with good connections. It's imperative. And number two, you must do this test. So it's called MPTL, and it was designed by the standards exactly for this reason. So the detail is modular plug terminated link. It's been around for a while. Many people are not aware of it, but the concept is it's pretty much looking at that plug very carefully and doing a frequency-based test, a certification test across that link. And we're going to be able to look at it in depth to see how good the performance is, plus do this PoE balance test across it. So MPTL testing is perfect security for security. One catch is I mentioned about the piece of the RJ45, the plug, that is different. You can imagine a Cat 5 plug is different to a Cat 6, and of course a Cat 6A. So now you will need to have a tuned adapter. Just one tuned adapter will do, and you would add this to your certifier to match the cable under test. And of course that's because that piece of plastic, that RJ45, is actually quite a basic product to work with. Okay, MPTL critical. Okay. So let's talk about what happens if you don't do it. What is this resistance unbalance and what goes wrong? Well, the good news is Power over Ethernet is a very, very stable system. It's fantastic. The engineers have done an amazing job with this. And inside the device, which will combine both power and data, or a power injector alone, is a balun. Now, if that balun senses any kind of imbalance, such as pair resistance, which could potentially lead to heat and fire, it just shuts off. So what I'm confirming here is if you don't do your resistance unbalance testing, you could potentially risk reliability, unreliability. As links get old or connections get warmer, if you're in a warmer environment, you risk it just stopping because it'll just cut out, okay, for safety. So certainly things won't burn down, but the safety mechanism is in there. Okay, if balance is saturated, it burns down. Okay, it stops. Sorry, it stops from the fires. Now, the next part is power verification. So you can imagine we've got our cable, we've got our connection, and we're happy with that. We've done our test. So what about the power going to that device? We could sometimes be faced with having to go over length. That's even scary as well. Well, some car parks might have difficult to access areas. So that could happen. So power delivery is critical. Let's look at how you best measure power to that area. Okay, so you need a device first and primarily, which is a load tester. So let's look at this term load tester. So it's a product. In this case, we're recommending the PoE Pro, but there is other products out there that will do a load test. But the key thing is do a load test against an international standard. So some of the things you need to know is YMAP, power at the source, the type of power at the source. That helps you work out what that device could be, especially for maintenance professionals, which are looking at, well, where is that thing? Is it an injector or is it a switch? And of course, pass fail to the standards. We'll see those in a moment, those standards, and it's a lot to know. That is inside these testers, okay? So please be aware that the majority of testers on the marketplace which test for PoE are only reading the switch. So there's a little chipset in there, it could read them and say, we see that. So it's a verification device. So again, just confirming, PoE Pro does just a brief load test against each individual standards just to check, can you do this? Can you actually deliver power across this line? Second part of just knowledge, as this is intended to be helpful knowledge for those in the industry. The second thing to know is when you are testing a link, always certify first and then do your PoE load test, but be aware of your patch cords. The patch cords, a lot of people use those mini patch cords and they can cause a large problem. It's subject to length. Of course, if you are going extended distances, you will struggle, but where possible, do avoid mini 28 AWG. They're mini patch cords and 30-day AWG if possible. They can be a problem because they're not designed for PoE load. They can work, but they will affect reliability, okay? And another tip is check your switch power budget. I know this seems quite daunting, but remember, this is a power feed and people keep adding things to it and adding points of weaknesses such as patch cords. So good practice is check those patch cords, make sure they're PoE rated, check your switch budget. Example, if you've got 24 ports, 60 watts, time that by 24 and look at your overall budget. Can it provide 1.4K? Please think that way. And that will at least help you consider, is my infrastructure up to date? Because again, we just keep adding cameras, keep adding components to our network. Okay, now moving ahead, I mentioned that there is a product, the PoE Pro, which will do that load test for you. Okay, so firstly, why is this interesting and important to talk about? Why is this important knowledge to know? It is the advent of 4-pair PoE. Since 4-pair PoE was introduced, we had to really look at our cable infrastructure, and I started that with saying, you need to certify. This is why. It's because of 4-pair PoE. We're powering across all 4 pairs. We need the balance. If we do that, you can imagine there's going to be power from the source device. Okay, and this is how the standards work. So the standards created the 802. So the IEEE created 802.3 BT, which has a class system from 0 to 8. And it's from class 5 to 8, which is highlighted now, where we start seeing 4-pair PoE come into play. The reason for that was just to add more functionality into products, giving them a little bit more power, such as cameras which can do pan, tilt, zoom functions, or maybe powering up a kiosk, a monitor, up to 90 watts. Okay, so the source device needs to be able to be tested, but once we add cabling, we're going to have a voltage drop. We're going to have attenuation. So there is the ability to also look at what is the minimum power required to run that test, to run that product, okay? So we'd just like to address what I'm sharing here is that this is the application standard. This is the difference between certification and application testing. And we're looking at, can I achieve these numbers? Of course, it's impossible to remember all this in the field. So this device, the PoE Pro, will do that for you. And a tip is you can leave it on a high setting. Note the high setting, example, class 8 is 90 watt. Yet after the voltage drop, we can see 73 watt. So let me just get my laser pointer there. So 90 watt to 73 watt. So the idea is you could leave the PoE Pro on the high setting, and that way when you test at the end device, you would see if you've got a little bit of extra headroom there. Have I got a little bit of extra resilience in there? And if I'm not passing, you can then reset it back down to low to see, am I achieving 73 watt? So my tip is you could always leave it at high if you're using PoE Pro to check a little extra capability in your link. So now moving on, what are some of these challenges? Why would I do that? I'd like you to think about temperature. Some of us are in warmer regions, and we may not be aware that with temperature, it affects our cabling plant. All products, all of the design products for network infrastructure were standardly, the standard design is at against 20 C, 20 degrees centigrade. So you can imagine, as soon as we start going up by 5 degrees, 10 degrees, or even more, example 40 degrees, suddenly your expected link length is no longer achievable, no longer reliable. The tip from the marketplace that we're seeing in warmer countries, is reliability is reduced right back to 65 meters. So what they're really saying is, if you want to actively deploy a 90-watt system, you're really looking at the recommending do not exceed 60 meters. And this is one of the things you can do in your ISO link loss budget, where you would do a test and come up with a resistance test or a bundle test across your link. Okay, so that's something you can do. So please consider temperature as a part of the design whenever you're designing these systems. If the system is already in place, please consider temperature as you do your daily maintenance routine. Is that camera on a post out there in a car park, and is it a really hot day? How far have I connected to that camera? You would need a device which can measure that length, okay? And to build in reliability or resilience, you may need to increase your power to that device. Okay, so what happens? They found that the advent of PoE and 4-pair PoE, you're actually putting a little bit of power into the cabling system. So we heard about temperature affecting it. Believe it or not, also a little bit of power goes into the bundles. And this is what some of the global cable vendors or manufacturers out there, in particular, I've got Molex, a snippet from Molex on the slide today. And all of the cable vendors out there have done some great work. However, this is interesting that it's pretty much saying that heat was discovered in the bundles. So this is, again, to inform you and make you aware. It is a problem, and this is why that reliability is affected. That balun inside the PoE device will switch off as that heat increases. Okay. Right, so as we move from infrastructure to power, we now start looking at adding the camera to the end. So I mentioned about always looking for a report. Please get a product with a report. And we would recommend the security test, because as a design from Trend Networks, we've tried to build the best report we can for our installers. And the objective here is to be able to get as many images as possible. You can put 6 images into this report, build it very, very quickly. So the idea is, if you go on site or do any maintenance, you can very quickly connect in. And in some cases, some products out there, vendor products out there, are very locked down. You may need a laptop or a pre-configuration to open up OnViv to use this device. If that's the case, security test at least still then connect and at least do your report for you. Okay, so the concept's quite simple. You're on a ladder. You're able to use PoE Pro to power device up if it's not connected to the MVR as yet. See where it is in position. Take some images. Load those images as proof of configuration or proof that it's in place. And of course, the team, the real security team, will address all the settings via the MVR at a later stage, but you just need to make sure it's in position and operational. And of course, create the report. So how would that look? How would that work? We would do a direct camera setup. We would go to an OnViv, if OnViv can be turned on, and we would do a scan and connect into the tester, into the camera. Other things we can do IP scans to check on the network. If you have a static network, which is very, very popular, you can also do a scan on that network to check or double check that you don't duplicate an address. One of the things we must not do is simply just add a camera and risk getting that address wrong. You would create a storm on there, and it's very, very difficult to find that other camera. So you have the ability to check an address on a static network prior to adding that camera and prior to adding that address to the camera and the camera on the network. If that makes sense. Okay, pinging and trace routes also very, very helpful, just to make sure we can get to devices and see response times. But ultimately, with these types of products, and the Trend product is very helpful to do a pan tilt zoom. I mentioned about the 4-pair PoE. This way, at least you can connect into it and check its functionality prior to leaving that site. Okay, lastly, and thank you for staying with us today. We're almost there. We're getting onto the network side. And I'd just like you to think about devices on the network. So in summary, again, we did cables, the power feed, we did add in the camera. Now the devices are on the network. So I want you to think about this retail store. It's got tills, it's got all these bits, it's got all these sensors. So we need to think about how would we manage them. And typically we would VLAN those products out. So this product again would have a report, and if you're doing maintenance or response work for a company such as a shopping center or a retail outlet, a report could at least show that your technical team turned up, installed it correctly, and should they come back, you can always use that report to check as well. So what sort of things are on a network? Typically it's CDP, LLDP, EDP, Cisco Discovery Protocol, Link Layer Discovery Protocol, or EDP. So these devices just read that and come up with a snip or information on a switch which you can use. And as those with us today which are very, very familiar with networking would know that it's really a filing system. So we're looking for that MAC and that IP address. Okay, but what else I'd like to share, let's get something very interesting for you today as we start to wrap up, is VLAN ID. Typically a lot of security specialists and maintenance specialists, they're locked out of networks because of, by design, a VLAN is there to try and separate networks and create another element of security, okay? So we can do an IP scan, and then we can find what VLANs are available. And something very, very important, I'll get to the next screen now, very important, is how busy is that VLAN? So I'd like you to think about that. I introduced that more devices are coming onto networks. There's going to be interest with AI with greater efficiency, more devices coming with that too. So maybe you start to find that as those devices are added to the network, how busy is that VLAN? So I just want to show you what I'm saying here. It's giving you a bandwidth rate here of being able to connect into a VLAN and see just how busy it is. Once again, thank you for joining us. We're just starting to wrap up now. This is the network element using a very simple network scanner to see how busy something is on a network. So again, smart buildings and IP systems technology continues to be deployed everywhere. The future is very positive. We see AI is going to bring more advantage to business, more potential for you to install and maintain networks. Okay, and we see that there's going to be greater growth across commercial buildings, even into roads and traffic areas. Okay, so summary, always add a timestamp proof of installation, always. We recommend reports on everything at minimum. Ensure PoE load testing is completed, and do, where you can, PoE link budget calculation. It will be helpful. I know that sounds very thorough, but it's a very good process to do. Do you follow your vendor and certification training? Please do join us at Chen Networks Academy. We'd love to see you. And review your current tools, seek a consultation. That's what we're here for. I hope this has been helpful. You may contact us, find your local sales contact to have a chat with him, or come and join us at the Chen Academy. We'll be able to help you. Okay, so once again, we hope you enjoyed the overview, and we will have more on this subject. Thank you again.